Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our session on H-Wing agility and flexibility with AEM Hybrid implementation. My name is Shruti Damle. I worked in DEPT as an AEM developer, and with me I have...
Well, my name is Juan Sanchez. I also work as an AEM developer at DEPT.
This will be our first time presenting at adaptTo, so we are super excited to be here among fellow AEM experts, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank our organizers and sponsors. Who we are DEPT. We pioneer in tech and marketing, and we help brands to stay ahead. We were founded in 2015 by a bunch of digital agencies that came together, and now we have grown to more than 4,000 employees all across the globe. Our headquarters are located in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and we are also a climate neutral and B Corp certified company. So good to know that we care about the environment. Adobe Experience Manager is one of the top DXP platforms that DEPT specializes in. And we have more than 500 Adobe resources, and more than 120 of them are certified experts. And we are also proud to say that we are Platinum Solution partners with Adobe. And since 2019, we have been regarded as the emerging solution partner in the Asia-Pacific region. Now let's get to the agenda. So after the introduction, I will briefly speak about the various solution approaches available in AEM. Then I will put some emphasis on AEM hybrid approach. Then we'll talk about the case that we worked on, what were the challenges that we faced, and what was our approach to solve them. At the end, there will be a demo, and then we will close the session by saying what we achieved with our approach. So a lot of you already are familiar about different solution approaches available within AEM, and we also looked at it briefly in previous session, Stefan's session. So this will be just a recap for people who are not yet so familiar with this. So to begin with, we have the full stack or the most traditional approach here. So with the full stack approach, it's all a unified architecture. So all the different modules within a typical AEM project, such as your core module or UE apps or your front-end modules and other modules, they are tightly coupled together. The content author has full control over the content that he or she is going to create. And also, regarding use of AEM core components, you can greatly utilize the out-of-the-box core components which are available within AEM. One thing to notice about this approach is on the performance level, full stack or traditional approach, it's not so great because everything is unified. And multi-channel content delivery is a little bit tricky with this approach. On the other hand, AEM also comes with the headless approach. And like the name suggests, it's more of a decoupled system. Headless approach or headless model is mostly based on the content delivery APIs. So the content is created by content authors in the author's instance, and there is typically some kind of external application which delivers the content. And the content can be delivered using content delivery APIs in the JSON format, for example, GraphQL APIs. But things to notice here is the content authors do not have total control on the control that they're creating. But this approach greatly can give you flexibility and compatibility. And also the use of AEM core components is not that well supported. Now, combining the best of both these approaches, we have the AEM hybrid approach. So as the name suggests, it's a combination of the headless and a full stack one, and it gives you more flexibility and scalability. And it can also offer you a great speed of development because front-end developers and back-end developers can work parallelly. It can also offer you a nice authoring experience for the authors, the vis-a-vis experience, and also the user experience is pretty good. On the other hand, however, AEM hybrid approach does have some complex implementation at the beginning of your project. It also has a significant learning curve attached to it. And it lacked documentation online when we were working on it. And now that's not the case. There are more documentation available. Now let's quickly take a look at what are the two flavors available within the hybrid solution in AEM. First one, we have the remote SPA and the SPA. Now let's dive into the remote SPA a little bit more. So like the name suggests, it's a remote. So it's based on the decoupled model. And in this approach, the front-end application is externally hosted. And in your front-end application, you can choose React or Next.js as your choice of libraries. And remote SPA also supports dynamic routing, but you do have to configure it explicitly. You do need to take care about the independent or external server setup, so there might be some costs involved with this approach, and you also have to take care about the infrastructure of the external server. In this approach, you will have multi-phase deployments, and the server-side rendering, or SSR, is handled by the front-end module. Now, on the other hand, we have the AEM SPA, which is more the coupled model of the hybrid approach. So in your SPA, you can have a choice of React or Angular, and it greatly supports use of AEM libraries. The authors can get the WYSIWYG approach. You do need to have one-to-one mapping between your front-end component and back-end component. Adobe already provides out-of-the-box or default Maven archetype for this approach, but you do need to have some additional setup done in order to have SSR or server-side rendering. Now, to talk about it from the more practical point of view, I'm going to hand it over to Juan.
Okay. Let's talk about our nice client. It's a very nice client. We are very happy with them, and yeah, I think that they are happy with us as well. When we received this client, this client came with a couple of requirements that maybe you can recognize from here. So as usual, a tight schedule. They wanted to build more than 30 components. They wanted to use cutting-edge technologies because, okay, why not, right? But something that was super important for them was the author-friendly part. At the end of the project, they wanted to be in control of their website, and they wanted to, from the marketing perspective, create their own campaigns, have vanity URLs, create everything within AEM. But also we saw at that point that there were really complex or heavy front-end integrations. We saw components that were complex from the front-end perspective. Another thing was the Adobe ecosystem. So at the very beginning, they started with a small thing, but they wanted to grow within the Adobe ecosystem and use all the things or all the tools that are there, like Adobe Target, Dynamic Media, and yeah, more. Excellent UX and UI for sure, and scalable and maintainable in the future. So when we saw this project, right, we saw like, okay, there are three main pillars here for us. The first one is customer experience, right? Author experience, what you see is what you get, is super important for them, scalability and maintainability, and that means that we have to use out-of-the-box things within AEM and has the support for this. With those pillars in mind, and based on the roadmap and the things that the client wanted to achieve and the amount of time, we decided to go with an AEM SPA approach. And we thought that, okay, this is the approach that will help them to fit or to manage, to complete all the expectations that they have. But, for sure, we had challenges with it. And the challenges is that by the moment when we wanted to implement the SPA approach, there were limited external information outside. Our front-end team within DEPT, well, they are super nice, but they wanted to have TypeScript. And it's something that was not out of the box in the Maven archetype, so we invest a lot of time, well, not a lot, but a lot of effort, I'm going to say it, to implement TypeScript in this. And the final one that Shruti already mentioned it is the server-side setup. So to talk about the server-side setup, I want you to put a little bit of attention on the image that we have here. This is the recommendation from Adobe perspective to implement server-side in an SPA approach. Basically, the browser will make a call, a request to AEM, normal, And then AEM can make a call to Adobe IO Runtime, will make a post call to Adobe IO Runtime, and Adobe IO Runtime will generate the HTML in a string, and that will be served to as a generated content to the browser at the end. So everything will be returned. Problems here. Adobe IO Runtime, limited documentation at that moment, so not much things outside. Separate license, so an extra cost for the client. And the solutions was still maturing at that moment. But then, also with the Maven archetype, we saw that is it possible to implement it with Express.js. So instead of Adobe IO Runtime, that is the last box that you see there, we put servers, an Express.js server in Azure. So our approach for SPA looks like this. So as you can see, we have AEM environment, and AEM has a publish, has an outer environment. And the publish instance is the one that will make the post call to an Azure environment where we have Express.js. Also, something to mention here is that from the developer perspective, we have only one repository, and the code is deployed to 2 places every time that they make a, let's say a commit or push to master. The code goes to AEM environment because it's an AEM project with everything, all the modules. And the code also goes automatically to Express.js in Azure environment. So it's deployed in both sides. From the content author perspective, then the user has, the content author has what you see is what you get with the SPA editor and the SPA editor SDK from AEM. And also, you can see that we can have integrations with this approach. For example, from the browser perspective, we can use React libraries to use Algolia, for instance. That is an example that something that we are using in this project. And you can use also microservices in the Azure environment to use SendGrid, for instance. OK, let's talk about the demo, something more fun. So in this demo, we are going to talk about introduction component, the contract JSON, that is super important for us, the documentation, storybook, how front-end and back-end is connected, front-end component, back-end component, and the authoring experience. So introduction component, we call it like that. You can see it here. It's a normal component that you can have in any page. So you have an image, you have a headline, description, CTA, and it also has requirements. For example, if you select size S or XS or M, then you are going to show more or less information. Now, when we receive those requirements and we receive a component like this, what it happens within the front end and the back end is that we sit together. And as a backend, I said to the front end, OK, what do you need to render this component? And we try to make it easier for both. We try to make it easier for the front-end perspective and also for the back-end perspective. And then we come up with a JSON contract like this. And then we say, OK, you know what? The front-ender, for example, Camila, our front-ender, said, OK, Juan, you know what? I need a headline. I need a description. I need this flag like this. I need, we can create an image object and a CTA object and the size like this. But then, after that, we set the documentation. And we say, OK, yeah, we already have the contract. That's fine. Let's set the documentation, and let's think from where are we going to get that information. And this is super crucial for our project because the authoring experience, again, is super important for the client. And from where are we going to get that information? That information will come from the author, will come from an API, will come from a content fragment, will be unique within the website, or will be across the website. It's not just about creating component. It's also thinking that if we modify the component, does the content author needs to go for each page and that the change there? Or then we need to create that script to make the change for them, something like that. That's the impact for the authors. And at the end, also the wireframes. And the wireframes is not about the design, because the design is there, but the wireframes is for the dialogues or for the content fragment models, if we are going to have them. Then, from the front-end perspective, I don't know if you are familiar with Storybook, I guess so, but Storybook is It's a tool for front-end developers, and I don't know, it's my experience, maybe not yours, but front-enders doesn't want to deal with AEM and install AEM in their local machines. So we decide, okay, let's use Storybook. It's a front-end tool. The front-enders work isolated from AEM. And they don't need, with this tool at the end, because everything is based on the contract JSON, they don't need support from the backenders to have up and running their AEM instance in their locals, right? And also it's super nice to use to test edge scenarios, and also for the client. Even before the backender makes a line of code, the front end, even the client or the frontend can start seeing edge cases. Okay, you know, if we have such a big or such a long headline, then the component style is breaking. So we can include those conditions as well in the dialog. So how the front end and the back end is connected in this approach is not so complex. At the end, it's a front end component made in React. We have a super important the adaptTo function. It's a certification question. Backend implementation, so you have this link model exporter that Stefan was talking about, and also, well, the authoring experience. And the Slim model exporter will be the one from the backend perspective to generate that JSON that the front end requires. Okay, so let's go back to let's show a little bit about this component. Let's see a little bit of code. So let's start first with the documentation. This is the documentation that so this is how we start building components, and it helps a lot, and that's why we wanted to share with you this experience. So first we create a document like this, where we have, this is the dialog that we agree upon. We have different versions of the component. This is the XS, and this is the JSON that will use this version of that component. The same for M and L, for example. When you see the big one, then this is how it looks like, and this is what frontend is expecting. Now, from a storybook perspective, it's a little bit more, let's say, more rich. You can see in the documentation each component, and this is set in the code. Each component, what is expecting, all the information, but also you can play around with the components. So you can see, for example, in an X, in this one, if it's too long, then you can see, for example, what happens if I include more information. I'm breaking the website or not. From the authoring perspective, it's a normal component. It's like a full stack. So you have access to AEM. You can use launches. You can use live copies, language code, language copies. You can you are using sites. You can use also content fragments as well. But all the components, you can use them. And this is the component. And the component has the dialog that we agree upon. From the backend perspective, what the backend needs to test in this case? Well, if the JSON that is being generated is the right one. And to see the JSON, well, maybe you already know this, but HTML, then model.json, and then you can see the JSON that the Slim model exporter is producing for this page, for each component. And then if I look for, here is the introduction component, and here is the information that we are sending. What the backenders needs to understand is that this needs to match what they agree upon in the very beginning. And if all the information is there, according to the version, then it will work. Ah, no, sorry. No, okay. I saw something was missing. Okay, in terms of code, as I said, it's one repository, so everything is like a normal project in AEM. So from the front-end perspective, the front-ender will be located in the UE front-end, how it should be, and they are creating the components. So I'm going to show the introduction component also here. So you have components, and then you have introduction, and then it's TypeScript, so they can define the component, the contract that we agree upon. So this is also helpful for us as a backender, so we can just check here and see, okay, they are expecting this. This is optional, this is not optional. So that's why it's not working, perhaps. And the introduction component, the class in TypeScript is where also they can put, for example, this what is highlighted here is that if in that properties that this component is expecting is something is not present, we can show nice messages to the content author to show them, okay, this is not full. I mean, this property needs to be there from the dialog. Or something is wrong, so it's easier. And also we can check, okay, if you are in authoring mode, show this, but if you are in publish instance, don't show anything. How this is connected to the backend, because this is just a React component. You can put this in another website and it will work if you provide the data. But everything happens here in this class, import components. So import components, oh, this is a very big. In import components, this is the important class, map2. And here is where we said, okay, this component made in the front-end part, in the React part, needs to be connected with the implementation in UE apps and in core. In UE apps, you need to define, as a backend developer, you need to define the dialog and what is the name of the component and those things. And that's the reference that is being set here. And until there is where the code from the front end ends. The front end doesn't need to do anything else. But also as a backender, we don't need to deal with the front end stuff. What is the work from the backend perspective? From the backend perspective, they need to go to UE apps. They need to create a component in UE apps, introduction, and then you have CQ dialog, everything the same. And you can apply inheritance with core components as well. And then you create your dialog. At the end, when you define those attributes here, you need to map them with an Slim model exporter, which is the one that will be in charge to generate that JSON that we agree upon. And if we go to core, where is the Slim model exporter is, you need to create a class, and the most important part is that you need to annotate the class as a Slim model exporter. And here is where we are injecting the information from the dialog, and we are generating the JSON as is required for frontend, right? So it's quite nice to work like this, because as a backender you are just focused generating a JSON, and frontenders, they are just creating components using React. Let's move back to the presentation. And this is super important. What is the development process using SPA? And this is was like for us was like, okay, this is amazing. This is how it looks like development process, at least for us, when we use full stack. And the thing is that if you the blue part is the blue dots is frontend, and the yellow is backend. We start with a requirement, but everything starts all the time with frontend. Frontend creates a component. They made the styles. They made the logic, they made the tests, and then they hand over that component to us. And we create the component in AEM, we create UE apps, everything, the dialog, and we made the HTML conversion. We test it, and sometimes the styles that they made clash with the styles in authoring in AEM, and it doesn't look pretty in authoring experience. Then we need to do rework. We check with them, okay, look, is this a style from AEM that is affecting? What can we do? I know you need to do this, that. Okay, we fix it. Again, HCL conversion, we test it, and it's done. What we saw is that there is a lot of dependency within front-end and back-end. I mean, the front, we need to wait for them. And it's complex to do parallel work, because since the HTML is not fully done, we cannot just say, okay, we are going to make this dialog and everything will be there. And most of the cases, we need to do rework. That's our experience there. And this is how it looks like in SPA. So it's quite straightforward. We start with a contract, and both, it doesn't matter in which time, we can start creating the component. I can start from the backend perspective, because we agree that I have to generate that JSON. And they can start creating components that will use that JSON at the end. So from the front-end perspective, create a component, style, logic, test. And from the backend perspective, again, create component, dialog, Slim model, exporter, and test. What are they going to test? I'm going to test if the JSON is the same. What they are going to test? Well, they are going to test in the storybook, isolated. So there is no dependency the parallel work can be done. At some point, our experience with this project is that when we started and we set everything, we saw like, okay, in around 2 weeks or 3 weeks, those Ninja React developers that we have at DEPT, they had pretty much all the components. And they just were waiting for our JSONs. And then we just producing JSONs and JSONs and JSONs, and then everything was done. But at some point also, we were ahead, and then they had to build the components for those heavy front-end ones. And hardly, we didn't have to do any rework on those components. What we achieve, okay, development speed, that for sure, front-end works isolated. We also work isolated. Auto-generated components, so we are using scripts for front-end. Those are available in the code that we are sharing. And also scripts to generate the scaffolding for the backend as well, like Juan, that maybe you know it. And also we have one in-house. Intuitive documentation, so as you saw, we have the most important part for developers. Okay, we have the code, right? And then the code is easy to follow. But we have the documentation, we have Storybook. Storybook not also works for the front-enders, but also works for the back-enders to test the component, but also works for the client to test the component before the components are even in AEM. Simplify onboarding. With all those documentation, but you may think, okay, simplify onboarding, why? Well, we need to look for front-enders that knows React, and we need to look for Java developers that can produce a JSON. And then, if you see it in that way, we don't need to deal with much things about AEM. Just a brief introduction in AEM, and then we have them up and running. Enhanced integration and flexible logic allocation. Now, at least from my perspective, it's easy for us to decide where to put the logic. There is already a React library that helps us to, for example, do the Algolia integration, or we need to do it in the backend part. So that flexible logic allocation allows us to do that. As a conclusion, we think that is a very nice approach. We wanted to share this experience with you, and we wanted to show you that is it possible to do it in a fast way, and yeah, you can have happy clients with an approach like this. So these are the resources. You can have all the things that we use. There is also the three last links. One is related to AEM HTML generator, Adobe practice at DEPT, where we show all the things that we are doing with Adobe, and the source code for this presentation. Now it's time for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. Juan, we also have some questions now. Seeing a general trend in the industry to move away from SPAs because of performance reasons and others, do you see SPA as a future-proof solution? Wouldn't MPA, headless rendering, be a more natural, simpler, and stabler approach?
I think SPA will stay for some moment because, yeah, I mean, the trend with the customers is not all the customers are always jumping onto the new trends and technologies. So SPA will be here at least for some time to stay, and then the shift would be gradual, I think.
Thank you. Historically, Alex had many discrepancies between Storybook and AEM in how code actually ended up working. How do you test this interaction in a hybrid implementation like that?
So at the end, what you saw in a Storybook is just a React component. It's just front-end code. There is nothing different than React code. There is nothing from AEM perspective there. The AEM part, and like as a glue between the SPA and the backend part, it just happens in that map to function. And that's it. I mean, at the end, you can reuse those components somewhere else because it's just pure React.
There are some more questions. I guess you're going to answer them in the chat afterwards. Thank you for having me on stage.
Yep.
Big applause.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.